Captain Thowrick had seen worse. Not that it gave him any comfort. Elysium dawn groaned around him, a lumbering beast dragged reluctantly through the void, its ancient metal hull seemingly held together by sheer spite. Thowrick liked to think the ship had personality, mostly because if it didn't, he was just talking to himself, and that was a slippery slope he wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. "We got company," grunted Zug, the towering, three-armed mechanic who could fix anything mechanical but couldn't fix his addiction to bad puns. Zug's face was a battlefield of scars and patches of oil, a testament to his love for both combats and greasy snacks. "Great," Thowrick replied, his voice heavy with the kind of sarcasm that should have been taxed. "What kind of company are we talking about? The annoying neighbor type or the murderous cult type?" Zug glanced at the sensor readout, which flickered more than it functioned properly. "Unknown vessel, keeping its distance but definitely on our tail. Probably not here to borrow sugar, Cap. And here I was ready to make new friends," Thowrick muttered as he tapped the intercom. "Bridge to crew. Looks like our day just got a whole lot more interesting. Everyone to stations. And by interesting, I mean potentially deadly." The bridge door whooshed open, and in sauntered Vera, their navigation officer and resident pessimist. She had the uncanny ability to find the black lining in any silver cloud. "Did you see the readings? I'd put money on them having guns bigger than our entire ship." Thowrick nodded. "I've seen dust mites with bigger guns than our ship. But let's not get technical." Vera rolled her eyes, the universal sign of resignation. She took her seat, fingers dancing over the controls with the kind of elegance that seemed misplaced on a ship like the Elysium Dawn. "We could try evasive maneuvers, but the last time I did that, we ended up missing half our cargo and all our pride." "Pride is overrated," Thowrick said, settling into the captain's chair. "Let's just focus on keeping our skins intact. Zug, get the engines ready to scream. Vera, prepare for evasive maneuvers. And for the love of whatever cosmic deities care, keep us from crashing into an asteroid." "No promises," Vera replied, though her voice carried a hint of a smile. It was rare, like a supernova. Thowrick glanced at the viewscreen. The alien ship was a shadow, lurking just beyond their sensor range, taunting them with its presence. He didn't like guessing games, especially when the stakes involved potential disintegration. The ship's intercom crackled to life, bringing the gravelly voice of Knox, their communications officer. "Cap, got some weird chatter coming through. Can't make sense of it, but it sounds alien, and not the friendly, take me to your leader kind. More like let's dissect you tone." "Perfect," Thowrick sighed, rubbing his temples. "Can you patch it through? Maybe a little alien language lesson will do us good before we're vaporized." "Ah, the old learn before you burn strategy," Knox quipped, sending the audio through. The bridge filled with a cacophony of clicks and hisses, like someone had let a bunch of malfunctioning robots loose in a snake pit. "Anyone speak snake robot?" Thowrick asked, only half joking. "That's a negative," Vera replied, still focused on the navigation controls. "But I'm pretty sure they're not asking us over for tea." Thowrick leaned back, contemplating their options, which were as vast as they were bleak. Running was an option, but they didn't have the fuel or the inclination. Fighting might work if they wanted to reduce their chances of surviving to zero. "All right, folks," Thowrick said, his voice laden with the kind of confidence only a captain who was fresh out of ideas could muster. "Let's see if we can't lose our new friends in that asteroid belt. Vera, take us in. Zug, let's hope those engines hold. If they don't, we'll just join the stars as cosmic debris," Zug replied cheerfully. They plunged into the asteroid field, a sea of rocks floating with the kind of lethargy that belied their deadly nature. Asteroids were the universe's way of reminding humanity that not all rocks were suitable for skipping across a pond. Vera was at the helm, guiding the Elysium Dawn with the precision of a drunken ballet dancer. Thowrick watched the viewscreen as asteroids loomed and passed, each close call another reminder of their mortality. "Not to be a pessimist," Vera said, her voice as steady as her nerves were frayed, "but this is madness." "It's only madness if we die," Thowrick countered. "If we make it, they'll call it brilliance." The alien ship followed, seemingly unfazed by the asteroid field. It moved with an eerie grace like a cat stalking its prey. "Cap," Knox chimed in, "they're still on us." and they're closing in. I'm starting to think they're not here for the scenery. I'm starting to think this was a bad idea." Vera added, her eyes scanning the controls. Thalric chuckled darkly. "Yeah, well, that's what makes it fun." As they weaved through the asteroid field, alarms blared and the ship shuddered under the strain. The Elysium Dawn wasn't built for this kind of maneuvering, but then again, neither was Thalric. But desperation was a hell of a motivator. "Incoming message." Nox shouted over the din. "They're hailing us." "Patch them through," Thalric ordered, bracing himself for the worst. The view screen flickered and an alien face appeared, all tentacles and anger. It spoke in a guttural language that was both unsettling and oddly melodic, like a death metal band with a penchant for opera. "Well, they look like they want to negotiate," Zug said, his sarcasm sharp enough to cut through the tension. Thalric stared at the alien, trying to decipher its intentions. "Put them on mute, would you? I'd like to discuss our options without feeling like I'm about to be eaten." Nox obliged, and the alien continued its monologue, oblivious to the fact that no one was listening. "All right, team, ideas are appreciated," Thalric said, turning to his crew. "Preferably ones that don't involve us being space dust. We could try the old play dead trick," Vera suggested. "Might work if they're not thorough. Or we could send Zug out there to reason with them," Nox added. "He's got a face that stops fights, mostly because it starts them." Zug grinned, revealing a set of teeth that had seen better days. "I'm flattered, but I think reasoning with them might just get us further dissected." Thalric considered their options, each more suicidal than the last. The alien continued its tirade, its face a mask of rage or possibly humor. It was hard to tell with aliens. "Zug, any chance we can outrun them?" Thalric asked, grasping at straws. "Only if they let us go first," Zug replied, tapping at the engine controls. "But I can give it a shot. Worst case, we'll blow up in a blaze of glory. Best case, we live to regret our choices another day," Vera muttered. Thalric nodded, making his decision. "All right, let's give them the slip. Nox, keep that mute button ready. I don't want another alien lecture on my intergalactic resume." As Zug coaxed more speed from the beleaguered engines, the Elysium Dawn shot forward, threading the needle through the asteroid field. The alien ship followed, its pursuit relentless. Thalric held his breath, watching the view screen as the alien vessel closed in. If they were going to make it, they needed a miracle, or at least a really good distraction. "Hey Cap," Nox said, his voice suddenly chipper. "I think I've got an idea." "Well, don't keep us in suspense," Thalric replied, his grip tightening on his armrests. "We got that load of industrial waste we've been hauling, right? Some of that stuff is pretty volatile." Thalric's eyes widened with realization. "You're thinking smoke screen." Nox grinned, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "More like a toxic cloud from hell. Might give us the edge we need." "You heard the man," Thalric said, nodding to Zug. "Let's make it rain." Zug's fingers flew across the controls, releasing their cargo into the void. As the waste dispersed, the alien ship hesitated, its sensors blinded by the sudden cloud of noxious material. "Looks like they're not big fans of chemical warfare," Vera noted, adjusting their course. "Then let's not waste the opportunity," Thalric said, eyes fixed on the screen. "Punch it, Zug. Let's see if we can't outrun their curiosity." With engines roaring like a beast from the depths of hell, the Elysium Dawn surged forward. Behind them, the alien ship struggled through the toxic cloud, its pursuit faltering. Thalric allowed himself a moment of triumph, but only a moment. Space was vast and unforgiving, and one victory didn't mean safety. Out here, survival was a game of inches, and they'd just gained a few more. "All right, folks," Thalric said, his voice as steady as he could manage, "let's keep this tin can flying. And next time, maybe we'll pick a quieter route." The crew laughed, their relief palpable but tempered with the knowledge that this was just another day aboard the Elysium Dawn. A ship held together by hope, spit, and a healthy dose of sarcasm. And as long as they had each other, they'd face whatever the universe threw their way. Because that's what humans did. They survived, even when the odds said they shouldn't. And as the alien ship faded into the distance, Thalric couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they'd earned one more day under the stars. The Elysium Dawn sailed through the void, the rattling of its aging frame a comforting reminder that it hadn't fallen apart yet, despite a universe intent on seeing it otherwise. Captain Thowrick sat in his chair like a king on a crumbling throne, eyeing the viewscreen with suspicion. The alien ship had pulled back, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. If he'd learned anything in his years of not dying, it was that the universe rarely handed out easy victories. Vera, the eternal pessimist, fixed her gaze on her instruments as if daring them to break. "I'd celebrate our escape if I thought we'd actually escaped," she said, her fingers tapping out a nervous rhythm on the console. Thowrick adjusted himself in his seat, putting on his best "I'm in charge" face. "We might still be in the frying pan, but at least we're not frying yet. Let's enjoy the lukewarm middle ground a bit longer." Knox's voice crackled over the intercom. "Cap, I've been snooping around the alien transmissions. I think I found something interesting, or, terrifying." "Terrifying is my favorite," Thowrick replied. "Lay it on me." "There's chatter about some kind of gravity weapon. Apparently they plan to yank us out of existence with it." Thowrick sighed. "Of course they do, because missiles and lasers are too passé." Vera smirked. "Gravity weapons, great. Just when I thought the universe couldn't think of a more creative way to kill us." "Maybe they're just overcompensating," Thowrick suggested. "Giant ships, gravity weapons, probably a puny self-esteem." "I'll pass on being the therapist for homicidal aliens," Vera retorted, "but thanks for the career advice." Zug, their three-armed mechanic, popped his head through a hatch in the floor, grease smeared across his scarred face. "Did I hear something about gravity weapons? Because I was just starting to feel good about our odds." Thowrick shook his head. "Apparently, the universe is conspiring to remind us that optimism is for suckers." Zug chuckled, a sound as rough as the ship's hull. "Well, if they use it on us, at least we'll go out with a bang, or a smash, or a splat." "Cheerful as ever, Zug," Vera said, her voice laced with sarcasm. "Aim to please," Zug replied, winking with the one eye that wasn't covered by a scar. Thowrick leaned forward, staring at the sensor readout, a device that flickered like it was powered by malicious intent rather than electricity. "We need a plan. Something to give us an edge against a weapon that can turn us into cosmic paint smears." Knox's voice chimed in again. "I've intercepted more about their intentions. Apparently, they're using precognitive abilities to anticipate our moves. It's like playing chess against someone who already knows your next 30 bad decisions." Vera groaned. "We're screwed. I can barely anticipate my next meal, let alone outthink a telepathic alien." "Look on the bright side," Thowrick said, trying to muster some enthusiasm. "At least now we know they've got their own unfair advantage." "Bright side," Vera echoed deadpan. "That's a relative term." Zug scratched his chin, smearing more grease. "We could try something they won't expect." "Like what?" Thowrick asked, his curiosity piqued. "Like doing something completely irrational. Humans are good at that." Vera laughed, a rare sound that felt like a small victory. "Yeah, irrationality might be the only thing they can't predict." Thowrick pondered the suggestion. "If they're using precognition, maybe a little chaos could throw them off." "Chaos is our specialty," Knox added, his voice filled with a mischief that was both reassuring and concerning. Thowrick grinned. "All right, let's give them a show. We'll zig when they think we'll zag, maybe even throw in a few spins for good measure." "And if we fail?" Vera asked, one eyebrow raised in skepticism. "Then at least we'll die in style," Thowrick replied, pushing buttons with the casual abandon of someone who'd long since accepted the inherent absurdity of his existence. "Could be worse," Zug added. "We could be alive and boring." "True," Thowrick said. "I've always preferred a brief, interesting life over a long, tedious one." The ship groaned as if agreeing with the sentiment, its metal bones protesting against the upcoming jolt of activity. They had a plan, if you could call a desperate gamble a plan, and that was enough to keep them moving forward, or sideways, or, in this case, in whatever unpredictable direction they could muster. Vera set the course, hands moving with the confidence of someone who had piloted the Elysium Dawn through various near-death experiences. "Get ready for evasive maneuvers. It's going to be a bumpy ride." Zug vanished back into his mechanical lair, probably to cajole the engines into cooperating with a mix of threats and promises. Thowrick had always admired the way Zug communicated with machinery, like a man wooing a particularly stubborn lover. Knox kept them updated on the aliens' progress. They're still tracking us, probably wondering what breed of lunatics they've stumbled upon. Only the finest brand of lunatics, Thalric muttered, staring at the view screen. The alien ship was there, a silhouette of menace against the endless starscape. The Elysium Dawn lurched into motion, careening through space with a reckless abandon that would have made any insurance adjuster weep. Thalric focused on the chaos outside, asteroids spinning past, their surfaces glinting in the distant starlight. He imagined each rock had a story, some long history of violence and indifference that matched his own. "Keep them guessing," Thalric said, his voice tinged with a mix of determination and fatalism. "We'll give them a dance they won't forget." Vera agreed, her grip steady on the controls. The ship swerved left, then right, dodging and weaving like a drunk boxer, its movements erratic enough to make even a precognitive mind second-guess itself. Thalric could feel the pull of gravity, the way it warped and twisted under the strain of their maneuvers. He hoped it would be enough to confuse the aliens, at least long enough to figure out their next move. The moments stretched, each second a lifetime as they danced with death in the vacuum of space. Thalric's heart pounded, but his mind was clear, a sensation that only seemed to occur when everything was going to hell. "Status, Knox?" Thalric asked, his voice clipped and focused. "They're holding back, probably trying to figure out if we've lost our minds," Knox reported, a hint of satisfaction in his tone. "That makes two of us," Vera said, her eyes glued to the swirling chaos outside. Thalric felt a sliver of hope. Perhaps unpredictability was the ultimate weapon against an enemy that could see the future. Maybe, just maybe, being human was enough. "Let's keep them on their toes," Thalric instructed. "Mix it up, randomize everything." Vera nodded, adjusting their trajectory with a series of jerks and spins that would have made any normal crew sick to their stomachs. But they weren't normal. They were survivors. Zug's voice echoed up from the engine room. "Engines are holding, but they're not happy about it. Might want to send them a fruit basket later." "I'll pencil it in," Thalric replied, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Time passed in a blur of movement and tension, each second feeling like an eternity as they played their game of cosmic chicken. The alien ship remained at a distance, its ominous presence a constant reminder of the threat looming over them. Finally, Thalric called out, "All right, let's see if we can find somewhere to regroup. Vera, plot us a course to the nearest safe harbor, or at least somewhere with a decent bar." "On it," Vera said, her fingers dancing over the controls with a confidence born of desperation. The Elysium Dawn shifted course, leaving behind the chaos of the asteroid field and the threat of the alien vessel. Their improvised dance had bought them time, but time was a fleeting currency in space. They needed to find a way to turn the tables, or at least prolong their existence long enough to enjoy a drink. As they sped away, Thalric allowed himself a moment of reflection. They'd survived another encounter, and while the odds were still stacked against them, they'd proven one thing: unpredictability was their greatest asset. "Next time someone asks, remind me that insanity is a valid strategy," Thalric said, his voice full of wry amusement. "Will do, Cap," Knox replied, the relief in his voice mirrored by the rest of the crew. They'd lived to fight another day, to face another challenge, to laugh in the face of overwhelming odds. And for now, that was enough. Because out here, in the vast, uncaring expanse of space, survival was the name of the game. And the crew of the Elysium Dawn, they were nothing if not resilient. The crew of the Elysium Dawn had seen better days, but no one could recall when those might have been. Thalric sat in the captain's chair, pretending it was a throne, though it often felt more like an electric chair with his luck. The ship was a relic, a museum piece that somehow cruised through the emptiness of space more by sheer determination, or dumb luck, than by mechanical reliability. "Vera, how's our parade of unpredictable moves coming along?" Thalric inquired, his voice laced with the kind of sarcasm that was practically a second language on this ship. Vera, eyes glued to the console, smirked. "Well, we're still in one piece, which is more than I can say for most of my past relationships, so there's that." "Noted," Thalric replied dryly. "Let's focus on keeping it that way." Knox was hunched over his terminal, fingers dancing across the keys like a concert pianist on a particularly enthusiastic bender. "I've got more of their transmissions," he said, not looking up. "Turns out they're just as confused by our antics as we hoped. They're trying to predict the unpredictable, which is apparently giving their precogs one hell of a migraine." "Good," Thalric said, a grim smile playing on his lips. "I've always believed in sharing the pain." Zug's voice crackled over the intercom from the bowels of the ship. "Engines are still holding, Cap, barely. They are as ornery as a three-legged mule, but they are running." "Keep them that way," Thalric instructed. "Knox, what else are they saying? Any more insights into their twisted minds?" Knox chuckled, a sound that somehow managed to be both amused and weary. "They're debating whether we're tactical geniuses or just, insane." "Why not both?" Vera suggested, as if insanity and genius were complementary personality traits. "Let's keep them guessing," Thalric said. "It's our best weapon right now." The alien ship was still out there, a persistent shadow trailing them like a creditor after a particularly slippery debtor. Its silhouette against the cosmos was a constant reminder of the threat they faced, a threat with a weapon that could tear them apart like wet tissue paper. Vera adjusted their course, steering the Elysium Dawn with a deftness that belied the ship's age and her own pessimistic outlook. "We need more than just fancy flying to get out of this one," she said, a rare note of concern in her voice. "Suggestions?" Thalric asked, looking around the bridge as if the metal walls might have any better ideas than he did. "Maybe if we act like we're malfunctioning, they'll think we're too broken to bother with," Zug suggested, emerging from a hatch like a grease-stained genie with an extra wish. Thalric considered it, tapping his chin thoughtfully. "Could work. We're halfway there already." "More than halfway," Vera muttered under her breath, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "All right, let's play possum," Thalric decided. "Make them think we're more trouble than we're worth." The ship groaned again, a symphony of creaks and rattles that underscored the plan. Thalric imagined the Elysium Dawn had opinions of its own, none of them particularly flattering. "Start faking engine troubles," Thalric ordered. "Zug, give them a show." "With pleasure," Zug replied, vanishing back into the labyrinthine depths of the ship. Moments later the lights flickered and the engine sputtered, the whole vessel vibrating like a tuning fork in the hands of a particularly angry giant. Knox watched the alien transmissions with keen interest. "They're buying it. They think we've lost control." "Not entirely wrong," Vera commented, eyes still on the swirling stars outside. The Elysium Dawn began a slow spin, drifting lazily through space in a manner that suggested it had taken one too many hits, or perhaps just one too many drinks. Thalric held his breath, watching the alien ship for any sign of aggression. "Nothing yet," Knox reported. "They're still hanging back, trying to figure out if we're worth the hassle." "Good," Thalric said. "Keep monitoring. Let me know if they so much as twitch in our direction." Vera glanced at him, her expression one of mild disbelief. "Are we really doing this, pretending to be dead in the water?" "It's a strategy," Thalric replied, shrugging. "And given our options, it's the best we've got." "Here's hoping they are as lazy as they are deadly," Vera said, her fingers tightly gripping the controls just in case they needed to snap back into action. Time stretched, each moment a drawn-out echo of uncertainty. The alien ship loomed in their view, a predator deciding whether the prey was still worth the effort. Thalric watched the sensors, their erratic flickering adding to the tension like a poorly timed laugh track. "They're moving," Knox announced suddenly, the tension in his voice unmistakable. "Towards us or away?" Thalric asked, his heart rate spiking. "Away." "For now," Knox confirmed after a brief pause, his shoulders sagging with relief. "Looks like they've decided to give us a pass," Vera said, a hint of disbelief in her tone. "Apparently being a basket case has its perks." "Never thought madness would be our saving grace," Thalric mused, shaking his head. "Zug, start bringing the engines back online. Slowly. We don't want to give them any reason to change their minds." "On it, Cap," Zug replied, his voice echoing up through the corridors. With the alien ship receding into the backdrop of space, Thalric allowed himself a moment to breathe. They'd pulled it off, albeit by the skin of their teeth. But survival was survival, no matter how it was achieved. "All right, everyone, let's get us to that safe harbor," Thalric said, leaning back in his chair. "And once we're there, drinks are on me." "Assuming the place is still standing by the time we get there," Vera said, setting their course with a deft touch. "Optimism, Vera. It's a beautiful thing," Thaurik replied with a grin, knowing full well she'd take it as the joke it was. The Elysium Dawn churned forward, engines humming back to life with a reluctance that matched the crew's own exhaustion. As they sped away from the scene of their latest narrow escape, Thaurik reflected on the day's events. In a universe that seemed to delight in stacking the odds against them, they'd proven once again that unpredictability, madness, and a bit of strategic incompetence could sometimes turn the tide. They weren't heroes, nor did they aspire to be. They were just trying to make it to the next port, the next day, the next moment. "Here's to unpredictability," Thaurik toasted, raising an imaginary glass to his crew, who chuckled and nodded in agreement. And as they sailed through the star-speckled void, one thing was certain. They might be out of their minds, but they were still very much alive. And in space, that was no small feat. The Elysium Dawn was limping along, still in one piece if you could call it that. The ship was more of a floating junkyard than a bastion of intergalactic prowess. But hey, beggars can't be choosers in the vast blackness of space. Captain Thaurik lounged in his chair, or his throne of misfortune, as he liked to think of it, surveying his ragtag crew as they tried to squeeze another day out of this rust bucket. "All right, crew," Thaurik announced, tapping the armrest like it owed him money. "Time to brainstorm. The alien vessel's not going to give up just because we played dead for a while." Vera snorted from her post. "Brainstorm, more like a brain drizzle with this lot. Speak for yourself," Zug retorted over the intercom. "My genius is just lying dormant like a hibernating bear. Wake it at your own risk." Knox, eyes still glued to the flickering terminal, chimed in. "We've got limited options. They've adapted to every trick we've got. I'm starting to think they're downloading our playbook." "That's assuming we have a playbook," Thaurik said. "We've barely got a pamphlet." "So what's the plan, Cap?" Vera asked, spinning lazily in her chair, the very picture of apathy. "Simple," Thaurik replied. "We need to figure out how to outsmart their precogs. Turns out second-guessing the unpredictable is harder than expected." Knox perked up, an idea forming behind eyes that were far too intelligent for this line of work. "Precogs rely on probability, right? They predict the most likely outcomes." "Yeah, well, we've got unpredictability down to a science," Thaurik said. "If we can figure a way to exploit that, we might just slip through their fingers." Zug's voice crackled back through the intercom. "You ever notice how the more improbable something is, the more likely we are to try it?" "That's our brand," Vera said with a smirk. "Improbable Solutions Incorporated." Knox tapped a few keys, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized the chaotic mess of algorithms on his screen. "The aliens' precogs are good, but they're not perfect. They're just modeling probabilities. If we can feed them a few wild cards, then we might just crash their system," Thaurik finished, "or at least give them a metaphorical headache." Vera leaned back, arms crossed, skepticism written all over her face. "And how exactly do we pull that off? We can't just pull a rabbit out of a hat." "No, but we can pull a rabbit out of something," Thaurik said, grinning like a man with a particularly nasty prank up his sleeve. "Zug, how do you feel about making this old crate dance?" "Like a puppet on a broken string, my specialty." Zug chuckled, the sound more villainous than reassuring. "All right, let's make it happen," Thaurik said, clapping his hands together. "Vera, you're our wild card. We need some erratic maneuvers, something that screams we've lost our minds." "Finally, a strategy I can get behind," Vera replied, cracking her knuckles in preparation. "Just don't get us killed in the process," Knox added, the voice of reason among the madness. The Elysium Dawn began its erratic dance through the void. It was less of a ballet and more of a drunken stagger, the ship lurching unpredictably through space. Vera was having the time of her life, piloting the vessel like a madwoman. The crew braced themselves as the ship zigzagged, a dizzying display that would have made even the most seasoned pilot break out in a cold sweat. "How's it going, Knox?" Thaurik asked, gripping the armrests as the ship took another sharp turn. "They're definitely struggling to keep up," Knox reported, eyes glued to his screen. "Their readings are all over the place." "Good. Zug, give us a bit more oomph," Thaurik ordered. "More oomph coming right up," Zug replied. The engines roared to life with a reluctant groan, and the ship's erratic path became even more unpredictable. "They're trying to compensate," Knox said, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "But we're throwing out so many variables they can't keep up." "Exactly what we want," Thowrick grinned. "Let's keep them guessing." Vera laughed. A wild, exhilarating sound that echoed through the bridge. "Feels like we're flying by the seat of our pants." "That's because we are," Thowrick replied. "But it's working." The alien vessel, with its sleek, menacing design, struggled to match the Elysium Dawn's chaotic movements. It was like watching a hawk try to follow a particularly erratic fly. The hawk had the advantage of power and speed, but the fly had unpredictability on its side. "What do we do if they catch up?" Vera asked, half joking, half serious. "We pray to whatever gods are left and hope they're feeling generous," Thowrick quipped. As the crew continued their desperate gambit, a thought struck Knox. "Cap, what if we drop some decoys? Create a few false sensor readings." "Now that's genius," Thowrick said. "Zug, can you rig up something like that?" "Piece of cake," Zug replied. "Just hope they go for it." "Let's make it happen," Thowrick commanded. Moments later, a series of small, hastily constructed drones were ejected from the Elysium Dawn. Each one emitted sensor echoes designed to mimic the ship's signatures. The void was suddenly alive with false targets, each one a potential distraction for their pursuers. "It's working," Knox said, unable to hide the note of triumph in his voice. "They're splitting their attention. Keep it up, people," Thowrick encouraged. "We're not out of this yet." The alien vessel hesitated, clearly struggling to decide which targets to prioritize. The crew watched as the ship faltered, its sleek form wavering as it tried to recalibrate its strategy. "Looks like we've got them on the ropes," Vera said, her tone a mixture of disbelief and satisfaction. "Let's not get cocky," Thowrick cautioned. "We need to keep this advantage as long as we can." "Agreed," Knox said, "but it's nice to see them squirm for a change." Thowrick nodded. It wasn't a victory, but it was a reprieve, a precious opportunity to turn the tables. The Elysium Dawn continued its unpredictable dance, a testament to the crew's resilience and willingness to defy the odds. The alien vessel, for all its technological superiority, was finding itself outmaneuvered by a ship held together by little more than duct tape and the stubborn determination of its crew. It was a testament to the human spirit, or at least to humanity's capacity for making madness a viable strategy. As they continued to evade their pursuers, a realization dawned on Thowrick. "We might actually pull this off." "Don't jinx it," Vera warned, though her eyes were alight with hope. "I'm not," Thowrick replied, though he knew better than to tempt fate. The Elysium Dawn pressed on, holding the line against the odds. Their unpredictable maneuvers, combined with the decoy drones, were confounding their opponents, granting them a temporary reprieve. It was a small victory, but in the unforgiving expanse of space, any victory was worth celebrating. "This might just work," Knox said, his voice barely concealing his disbelief. "It will work," Thowrick asserted, his confidence bolstered by their success. "We've got them right where we want them." For now, at least, the Elysium Dawn and its crew had found a way to survive. In the chaotic dance of life and death, they'd proven once again that unpredictability was a powerful weapon, and though the future remained uncertain, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the ship sailed on through the stars, an uneasy peace settled over the crew. They'd bought themselves time, but the fight was far from over. The alien vessel was still out there, still a threat, and the universe was still a place of danger and uncertainty. But they'd face it together, with grim determination and a touch of madness. Because in the end, that's what made them strong: their refusal to back down, their willingness to defy the odds, and their unyielding belief in the power of the unpredictable. The Elysium Dawn creaked through space like an elderly tortoise trying to sprint. It would have been an inspiring sight if it weren't so damn pathetic. The flickering lights on the bridge added a strobe effect to the scene, making it look like a cut-rate disco party. Captain Thowrick sat in his chair, a parody of command, as the ship shuddered, belched smoke, and generally acted like it was auditioning for a role as a haunted house in space. "Anyone else feel like we're one bad sneeze away from total disintegration?" Vera drawled, not even bothering to look up from her console. "Only every time I take a breath," Zug replied from the intercom, his voice crackling with static. "But on the bright side, we might be able to sell tickets to this death trap as an amusement ride." "Amusement for who?" Knox asked, peering at the terminal like it was a particularly uncooperative puzzle. Even the masochists would demand a refund. Thowrick leaned back, contemplating the ceiling like he expected it to provide divine inspiration. "All right, crew," he said, clapping his hands together with far more enthusiasm than anyone felt. "We've had our fun. Now how about we focus on not becoming space debris?" "That's a tall order, Captain," Knox said, gesturing around at the state of the ship. "In case you haven't noticed, we're flying a glorified tin can." Vera snorted. "Tin can. More like a rust bucket with delusions of grandeur." "Enough," Thowrick interrupted, though he couldn't entirely suppress a grin. "Let's not turn this into a roast of the Elysium dawn. She's got feelings too, you know." The mood was tense, but the humor was a lifeline, the only thing keeping despair at bay. Morale was lower than a limbo champion in a black hole, and Thowrick knew it. The alien ship was still out there, a lurking menace ready to finish what it started. The Elysium dawn was holding together by sheer spite and duct tape, and neither was in infinite supply. "Status report, Knox," Thowrick ordered, trying to sound authoritative. In reality, he felt about as in control as a puppet with tangled strings. "Damage is extensive," Knox replied, eyes skimming over the terminal. "Engines are functioning at 30%, weapons are barely operational, and the sensor readout is more static than signal." "So, business as usual then," Vera quipped, though the edge in her voice was sharp enough to cut. "Pretty much," Knox agreed. "If we were any slower, we'd be moving backwards." Thowrick sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "All right, let's regroup. We've got to come up with a new plan, and fast." "New plan?" Zug's voice crackled over the intercom. Incredulous. "The first one barely worked, and now we're as welcome in space as a sneeze in a spacesuit." "True," Thowrick admitted. "But if there's one thing we know how to do, it's making something out of nothing. Or at least making nothing look like something," Vera added dryly. "Let's get creative," Thowrick said, ignoring her. "The aliens think they're dealing with a predictable enemy. We need to be more unpredictable than a cat in a yarn shop." "That might require more coffee," Knox said, rubbing his temples, "and maybe some divine intervention." "Well, we're fresh out of both," Thowrick replied, "so let's make do with what we've got." "Which is what exactly?" Vera asked, raising an eyebrow. "Each other," Thowrick said, with all the optimism of a doomed man clutching at straws, "and a penchant for chaos." There was a moment of silence as the crew absorbed this. It was a grim reality, but it was their reality, and they'd faced worse with less. "Fine," Vera said, crossing her arms. "Let's do it. What's the plan, Captain?" "Glad you asked," Thowrick said, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of desperation and determination. "We're going to give those aliens the biggest headache of their lives." "How?" Knox asked, curiosity piqued despite himself. "By exploiting our most valuable asset," Thowrick replied. "And what's that?" Zug asked, genuinely puzzled. "Our unpredictability," Thowrick said with a grin. "Turns out being a chaotic mess can have its advantages." "Is that really an asset?" Vera asked, skeptical as ever. "In our case, yes," Thowrick said. "The aliens are relying on probability, right? They're predicting our moves like we're playing chess, but we're not playing chess. We're playing, well, something else entirely." "Hopscotch with grenades," Zug suggested. "Exactly," Thowrick agreed. "And if we can keep them guessing, we might just find a way out of this." Knox frowned, thinking it over. "It's risky." "Everything we do is risky," Thowrick pointed out. "It's our specialty." "And if it all goes sideways?" Vera asked. "Then at least we'll go out in style," Thowrick said with a shrug. "But I'm betting we can pull this off." "All right, I'm in," Vera said, her expression hardening with resolve. "But if we die, I'm haunting you in the afterlife." Thowrick chuckled. "Deal." "Let's get moving then," Knox said, already turning back to his terminal. "We've got some chaos to unleash." The crew set to work, each member moving with a purpose that belied the hopelessness of their situation. Thowrick watched them, a strange sort of pride swelling in his chest. They might be a motley crew, but they were his motley crew, and he wouldn't trade them for all the sleek, efficient ships in the universe. As they worked, the ship continued to groan and shudder, its battered frame protesting the abuse. But there was a sense of shared determination, an unspoken agreement that they'd go down swinging if they had to. Because in the vast, uncaring expanse of space, sometimes all you had was the fight, and fight they would. As the minutes ticked by, the plan took shape, a patchwork of ideas stitched together with desperation and a dash of brilliance. The goal was simple: turn the Elysium Dawn into the most erratic, unpredictable target imaginable. If they couldn't outgun the aliens, they'd outwit them. Thalric glanced around at his crew, a ragtag bunch if ever there was one, but there was fire in their eyes, a glimmer of defiance that said they weren't beaten yet. "Ready?" he asked, looking each of them in the eye. Nox nodded, his fingers hovering over the console like a pianist about to unleash a symphony of chaos. "As ready as we'll ever be." Vera cracked her knuckles, a predatory grin on her face. "Let's make them regret ever messing with us." "Zug?" Thalric asked, knowing full well that their tech wizard was the linchpin of this insane operation. "Give me a second," Zug replied, the sound of furious typing echoing through the intercom. "They're all set, engines primed for some serious funky business." "Funky business it is," Thalric said, unable to keep the grin off his face. "Let's give them a show they'll never forget." With a nod to Vera, the Elysium Dawn lurched into motion, its path more erratic than ever. It wasn't so much flying as it was dancing, or perhaps convulsing, through space. The ship twisted and turned, looping and spiraling in a way that defied all expectations, its unpredictability a weapon in itself. "How are they responding, Nox?" Thalric asked, trying to keep a grip as the ship executed a particularly nauseating spin. "They're scrambling," Nox reported, eyes glued to the screen. "Their systems can't handle all the new variables." "Good," Thalric said. "Let's keep them on their toes." Vera whooped, her hands a blur over the controls. "This is what I signed up for. Who knew chaos could be so much fun?" "Only you could enjoy this," Nox muttered, though there was a hint of admiration in his voice. The alien vessel, with all its sleek, deadly efficiency, was struggling to lock onto their wildly unpredictable trajectory. Its attempts to predict the Elysium Dawn's movements were thwarted at every turn. And for the first time since the chase began, the humans had the upper hand. "Looks like they're getting frustrated," Nox said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "They keep trying to adapt, but we're throwing too much at them." "That's the plan," Thalric said, his grin wide and triumphant. "Let's show them what humanity's really made of." As the Elysium Dawn continued its chaotic dance, the aliens found themselves facing the unexpected, the one thing their cold, calculating systems couldn't account for. It was a testament to the human spirit, a reminder that sometimes chaos and madness were the best weapons of all. "They're falling back," Nox said, disbelief evident in his voice. "I think they're actually retreating." "Don't sound so surprised," Thalric replied, though he too could hardly believe it. "We knew we were special." "Special ed, maybe," Vera quipped, though her eyes were bright with triumph. "Let's not celebrate just yet," Nox cautioned. "They might regroup. Then we'll just have to outwit them again," Thalric said confidently. "We've shown them what we're capable of, and if they want more, we'll give it to them." The crew laughed, a sound of shared relief and renewed hope. For the first time in what felt like forever, they had the upper hand, and it felt damn good. As the alien ship retreated, the Elysium Dawn drifted in space, its battered frame a testament, not to anything grand but to sheer stubborn survival. They hadn't defeated the aliens, not yet, but they'd proven that humanity was not to be underestimated. And as they plotted their next move, knowing full well that the fight was far from over, Thalric and his crew were ready to face whatever the universe threw at them next. Because they were human, and if there was one thing humans were good at, it was beating the odds. The Elysium Dawn was limping through the void like a drunken space whale, and Captain Thalric couldn't help but grin at the absurdity of it all. Here they were, the galaxy's most dysfunctional crew, taking on aliens with a strategy that wouldn't feel out of place in a Looney Tunes episode. But hey, it was working, or at least not failing as miserably as expected. "What's the alien ship doing now, Nox?" Thalric asked, trying to keep his voice steady even as the ship lurched unpredictably. "They're trying to recalibrate, but we're throwing them off," Nox replied, his eyes flicking over the glitchy terminal readouts. It's like they're trying to juggle flaming swords while riding a unicycle. Good. Let's keep them sweating, Thalric said, a grin creeping onto his face. Vera, how's the juking and jiving? Smooth as a sandpaper slide, Vera replied, her fingers dancing over the controls with reckless abandon. I think I just made the ship do a pirouette. Zug's voice crackled through the intercom, punctuated by a burst of static. And here I thought ballet in space was just something for the tourists. Thalric chuckled, the sound more relieved than amused. Glad to see your optimism hasn't taken a hit, Zug. Optimism, Captain. Zug snorted. I'm just too dumb to know when we're doomed. Well, that's comforting, said Thalric. He turned his attention back to the task at hand. Let's keep pressing them. We might just pull this off, awkward waltz and all. Awkward waltz, Vera exclaimed, steering the ship into a corkscrew maneuver that made Thalric's stomach do backflips, more like a rave with a side of vertigo. Knox glanced up, his expression torn between admiration and nausea. Could we maybe dial it down a bit on the motion sickness? My breakfast is threatening a mutiny. Vera just smirked. Can't handle a little turbulence, Knox. I'm just getting started. Here's hoping your stomach has better discipline than our ship, Thalric said, leaning back and buckling in tighter as the next wave of chaos hit. The Elysium dawn was now a ghostly blur of erratic maneuvers, a dizzying spectacle of randomness that defied logic and strategy. Think they'll call for backup? Zug asked, a hint of genuine curiosity in his usually sarcastic tone. Probably, Knox replied, not missing a beat. But by the time they show up, we'll be long gone, or at least that's the plan. Plans are overrated, Thalric said with a shrug. We improvise, we adapt, we survive. It's what makes us human. That and our endless capacity for denial, Vera added with a dry chuckle. Thalric grinned, feeling a strange but welcome surge of camaraderie. This was what they did best, turning the impossible into the improbable and then bluffing their way through the rest. All right, let's hit them with more randomness, Thalric commanded, his voice firming with determination. Zug, throw in some decoys. Vera, keep up the dance moves. Knox, keep an eye on their response. Let's make them regret ever underestimating us. Decoys away, Zug announced, his fingers flying over his console. In an instant, the space around the Elysium dawn was filled with phantom signals, ghost ships that danced alongside them, flickering in and out like bad television reception, designed to break the aliens' predictive algorithms. They're definitely confused, Knox reported, his voice tinged with satisfaction. Their systems are going into overdrive trying to process all the new data. Good. Confusion is our ally, Thalric said, feeling a strange kinship with chaos itself. And here I thought our only ally was dumb luck, Vera quipped, the ship executing a particularly wild maneuver that had even Thalric white-knuckling his chair. Luck's just chaos we haven't figured out yet, Thalric replied, a wry smile tugging at his lips. The alien ship was visibly faltering now, its efforts to lock onto the Elysium dawn growing increasingly desperate. It was a beautiful thing to watch, an enemy so sure of its superiority brought to its knees by the unpredictability of human ingenuity. We've got them on the ropes, Knox said, almost incredulous. Their systems are in disarray. It's like their ships developed a bad case of interstellar hiccups. Good. Let them choke on it, Thalric said with grim satisfaction. But even as he basked in this small victory, a familiar sense of foreboding settled over him. The damn gravity weapon, still looming, still a threat they couldn't ignore. Incoming transmission, Knox suddenly announced, drawing everyone's attention. It's the aliens. Patch it through, Thalric ordered, curious despite himself. The alien voice that filled the bridge was cold, mechanical, and strangely devoid of emotion. Human vessel, your resistance is noted. Stand down and prepare for assimilation. Assimilation, Vera muttered, rolling her eyes. Do they think we're computers? Or just more entertaining to play with, Zug suggested. Like a cat with a laser pointer. Thalric leaned forward, his expression hardening. This is Captain Thalric of the Elysium Dawn. We don't do assimilation. Too many HR issues. Cease your futile maneuvers, the alien voice continued, unperturbed. Your unpredictability is unwelcome. Unwelcome is our specialty, Thalric retorted, Now I suggest you back off before we really get creative. There was a pause, the silence stretching like a rubber band ready to snap. Then the alien voice returned, tinged with what might have been frustration. You are an anomaly, Captain, an inconvenience. Inconvenient, chaotic, and damn proud of it, Thowrick shot back. Now, either bring something new to the table or get lost. The line went dead, the silence replaced by the soft hum of the ship systems. It was an eerie moment, a brief lull in the chaos that had become their new normal. Well, that was fun, Vera said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Think they took the hint? Maybe. Maybe not, Thowrick replied, unconsciously cracking his knuckles. But we've got a bigger problem. The gravity weapon? Knox asked. Yeah, Thowrick confirmed, his mind racing through possibilities. It's still out there and they're probably planning to use it. Great, Vera sighed, her enthusiasm suddenly tempered by the grim reality. So what's the plan, Captain? Thowrick took a deep breath, letting the tension roll off his shoulders. We keep doing what we do best, being unpredictable. We need to make sure they can't get a lock on us. Easy enough, Zug said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. But we can't keep this up forever. No, we can't, Thowrick agreed. But we can buy ourselves time, enough to come up with something. Creative, huh? Vera echoed, a glint of mischief in her eyes. I think I can handle that. Thowrick nodded, a grim determination settling over him. They'd come so far, and he wasn't about to let a bunch of robotic aliens with a superiority complex take them down now. All right, crew. Let's show them what happens when you corner a bunch of crazy humans, he said, feeling the fire of defiance reignite within him. Knox, keep monitoring their systems. Vera, keep us unpredictable. Zug, prepare for some fancy tech work. We're not out of this yet. As the Elysium dawn lurched back into its chaotic dance, Thowrick watched his crew, each of them moving with a purpose that belied the odds stacked against them. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and quite possibly out of their minds, but they had one thing the aliens didn't: sheer, unadulterated human stubbornness. And if that wasn't enough to see them through, well, at least they'd go down swinging. Because in the grand, uncaring void of space, sometimes chaos was the best weapon you had. The Elysium dawn stuttered through the void, a symphony of creaks and groans that would have made any decent mechanic weep. But Captain Thowrick sat in his chair, grinning like a man who'd just been told the galaxy's biggest punchline. They were dangling over the abyss of defeat, and damn if it wasn't thrilling. We're still giving them a migraine. Thowrick called, his voice fighting to be heard over the clatter of a ship held together by duct tape and sheer willpower. More like a full-blown existential crisis, Knox replied, pounding on the terminal when it flickered in protest. Their systems are frantically rewriting themselves, trying to make sense of our, well, lack of sense. Typical humans, Vera chimed in with a smirk, her fingers dancing over the controls with the precision of a drunk spider on a tightrope. Make chaos your co-pilot and call it strategy. Zug's face appeared on the nearest screen, looking like a man who just found out his lottery win was a prank. You know, Captain, I used to think I was crazy for signing up with you lot. Now I know I'm just crazy. Embrace it, Zug, Thowrick said, tapping his temple. Sanity's overrated. Besides, have you ever tried reasoning with a gravity weapon? Vera snorted, sending the Elysium dawn into a corkscrew that made Thowrick's stomach lurch in protest. I'll pencil that in right after I teach it to Tango. Good news, Captain, Knox interrupted, his face alight with that devious gleam he got when something was about to break, preferably not their ship. Their precogs are confused. They're throwing out probabilities like confetti at a botched wedding. Excellent, Thowrick said, his grin widening. That means they're starting to see the beauty of unpredictability. Let's show them the full art piece. Zug leaned in, his expression part amusement, part sheer disbelief. You have a plan, Captain, or are we just improvising our way to a heroic death? Improvising is the plan, Thowrick replied, his eyes glinting with a mischievous light. It's what humans do best. The alien ship, a monolithic presence that loomed like doom itself, was visibly twitching, struggling to adapt as the Elysium dawn danced circles around it like a gnat with a death wish. Every maneuver, every swerve was a calculated risk with a dash of lunacy, and Thowrick couldn't have been more proud. Decoys are still holding. Thalric asked, the ship shuddering as they pulled another evasive move that would have given a lesser pilot a heart attack. Like a charm, Zug said, his voice layered with a kind of glee that came only from being one step ahead of destruction. They're chasing ghosts while we're slipping through their fingers. Keep it up, Thalric ordered, his voice steel-coated in humor. We're not out of this yet. The alien voice crackled back over the comms, sounding more mechanical than ever, as if the speaker had a permanent sneer. Human vessel, your resistance is an inconvenience. Stand down now. You already said that, Vera quipped, rolling her eyes. I guess creativity isn't in their programming. Seems like they're not taking the hint, Knox mused, his fingers dancing over his terminal like a pianist playing a symphony in the middle of an earthquake. Then let's give them something to think about, Thalric said, his voice low and dangerous, something they can't predict, can't control. As if on cue, the Elysium Dawn systems flickered to life, lights flashing in what felt like defiance. Thalric felt a surge of pride. Here they were, a ragtag crew defying the odds with nothing but wit and a refusal to go quietly into the void. Zug, I need a tech miracle, Thalric said, his tone full of the kind of calm that came from having nothing left to lose. Can you give me one? Miracles I can do, Zug replied, his voice a mix of bravado and sheer lunacy. The impossible takes a bit longer. Then let's aim for impossible, Thalric said, leaning back as the ship lurched again, a testament to its undying spirit. Vera, keep us unpredictable. Knox, keep their systems guessing. We're not giving them an inch. Captain, Knox cut in, his voice alive with urgency. Their gravity weapons charging, they're going for a Hail Mary. Of course they are, Thalric muttered, his mind a whirlwind of calculations and half-baked ideas. Everyone hang on, we're about to make history or a spectacular mess. The alien ship loomed ever closer, its intentions clear, and Thalric felt a thrill of anticipation. They were gambling with fate, each move a roll of the dice, and the stakes had never been higher. All right, crew, Thalric said, the glint in his eye daring the universe to do its worst. Let's break their shiny toy. Vera's response was to yank the controls, sending the Dawn into a spin that would have sent seasoned pilots scrambling for the nearest exit. But Vera, she was grinning like she'd just been handed a box of chaos and told to go wild. Brace yourselves, she announced, the ship tilting at an angle that would have made gravity itself weep. The alien ship fired, its gravity weapon a blinding flash that seemed to consume the cosmos. But the Elysium Dawn, true to its namesake, rose above, dancing, weaving like a ghost unwilling to be caught. They missed, Knox shouted, disbelief coloring his voice as the readings confirmed their victory. Of course they did, Thalric said, his grin wide enough to split his face. We're human, and that's our superpower. Zug let out a whoop of triumph, his fists pumping the air as the alien ship faltered, its systems struggling to recalibrate. Take that, you mechanical bastards. The alien voice returned, a note of irritation now audible. Human vessel, your actions are illogical. We're human, Vera shot back, the ship leveling out as they gained the upper hand. Logic isn't our strong suit. Thalric leaned forward, his voice full of the confidence that came from knowing they'd just done the impossible. Here's the deal. You leave now, or we'll show you what else we can do when we really put our minds to it. The silence was deafening. A moment of tension stretched taut before the alien ship began to retreat, its systems clearly overwhelmed by the chaos they'd unleashed. We did it, Knox said, his voice trembling with relief as the alien ship faded from view. They're retreating. Thalric allowed himself a moment of triumph, the adrenaline singing through his veins like a drug. Good work, team. We showed them the beauty of human ingenuity. Vera let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her eyes bright with the thrill of victory. And here I thought today was going to be boring. Zug clapped his hands, his grin infectious. We're officially the craziest crew in the galaxy, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Thalric chuckled, the sound ringing with relief and pride. Let's not get too comfortable. We've still got a ship to fix and a galaxy to navigate, but for now, we celebrate. Knox interrupted, his eyes alight with the prospect of a well-earned break. Absolutely, Thalric agreed, his heart swelling with camaraderie. We've earned it. As the Elysium Dawn settled into the quiet hum of space, its crew finally taking a breather, Thowrick couldn't help but reflect on the madness they'd just survived. They'd danced with chaos and come out on top, proving once again that human unpredictability was the universe's wild card. And as they drifted onward with the stars as their only witness, Thowrick knew that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Because in the end, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about doing so with style. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of luck. The Elysium dawn drifted through the aftermath of its improbable victory, its hull creaking like the bones of an old warhorse that had somehow survived the battlefield. Inside, the crew was a whirlwind of motion and noise, a testament to human resilience, or maybe just a refusal to admit when they were beat. Captain Thowrick leaned back in his seat, surveying the organized chaos with the satisfaction of a man who knew he'd just pulled off the impossible and lived to brag about it. Well, folks, I think we just proved that we're the galaxy's most unpredictable nutcases. Zug scoffed, his face scrunched into something like disbelief. More like the galaxy's luckiest. I half expected to get turned into space dust. Luck, skill, or sheer dumb courage were still here. Vera chimed in, her fingers tapping a rhythm on her console. And they're not. Knox snorted, his eyes glued to the flickering terminal that belched out data like a drunk at a confessional. A retreat was a thing of beauty, like watching a cat trying to swim. Thowrick chuckled, the sound echoing through the bridge like a shot of adrenaline. Let's not forget, folks, they had all the tech in the universe and we had excitement and a penchant for chaos. I'd say we're doing pretty well. Zug shook his head, a grin spreading across his face despite himself. I'm not sure if I should be proud or scared that this is now our standard operating procedure. Why choose? Thowrick replied, his grin as wide and reckless as the void outside. Embrace the fear, cherish the pride. It's all part of the package. Vera stretched, her limbs popping with the satisfaction of a job well done. So, Captain, what's next on our list of life-threatening activities? First, we patch up whatever's still holding us together, Thowrick said, surveying the cockpit with a critical eye. Then we head home, wherever the hell that is these days. Ah, home, Knox said, a wistful note in his voice. A place where we can pretend the universe doesn't want to kill us every other Tuesday. Home is where the hull's sufficiently reinforced, Vera added, a sly smile playing on her lips, and where the gravity doesn't try to play catch with your breakfast. Thowrick chuckled, nodding. Let's get a move on then. I'd like to see this floating scrap heap in one piece for a change. The crew got to work, the clatter and bustle filling the ship as they patched, tinkered, and swore like a choir of sailors who've just realized they are out of rum. It was a familiar dance, one they performed with the kind of grudging affection usually reserved for old friends with terrible habits. So, Captain, Zug asked as he replaced a panel that had seen better days. What do we tell the folks back home? Hey, we survived an alien encounter and didn't blow ourselves up. Aren't you proud? Pretty much, Thowrick replied, his tone light but with an undercurrent of seriousness. And we remind them that human stubbornness isn't just a cliché, it's our best weapon. Vera smirked, tweaking a control that had decided it would rather be on fire than functional. And we do it with style, of course. Can't forget the style. It's all about the presentation, Knox agreed, jabbing at his screen with more enthusiasm than the terminal probably warranted. We may be crazy, but we're not barbarians. Speak for yourself, Zug muttered, shaking his head. I'm one malfunction away from full-on barbarian. As the ship hummed back to a semblance of order, the crew settled into a comfortable rhythm, each task a piece of the puzzle that kept them alive and, more importantly, kept them going. They were bonded by more than just proximity, a shared madness, a defiance that said, we're here and we're not leaving quietly. How's our course looking, Vera? Thowrick asked, leaning over to peer at her console. Set for somewhere vaguely resembling home, she replied, adjusting the trajectory with a twist of her wrist. We'll be back in time to regale everyone with tales of our idiotic bravery. Good, Thowrick said, nodding. Let's make sure we've got a ship to tell those stories from. The Elysium dawn lurched slightly as it adjusted its path, the stars outside shifting with the grace of a well-oiled machine. Inside, the crew continued their work, their banter a steady rhythm that kept the silence of space at bay. So, do we get medals for this? Knox asked, not entirely joking. You know, for surviving when survival was clearly optional. Medals, promotions, maybe even a parade, Vera said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Then we'll wake up and realize it was all a dream. Thowrick grinned, his eyes on the endless stretch of stars. I'd settle for a drink and a decent meal. I'd settle for a bed that doesn't try to eject me every time we hit a bump, Zug added, his tone dry as a Martian desert. The laughter was genuine, the kind that comes not just from humor, but from relief and the knowledge that they'd faced the void and won, however impossibly. It was a reminder that they were still here, still fighting, still alive. As the ship cruised through the black, the crew found themselves reflecting on what they'd achieved. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about proving that humanity, with all its flaws and failings, could adapt, could endure, could laugh in the face of doom and come out swinging. We did good, didn't we? Zug asked, his voice softening as he looked around at his crewmates. Damn right we did, Thowrick replied, his voice full of quiet pride. We showed them what humans are made of. And we didn't even lose anyone this time, Vera added, a note of satisfaction in her voice. Always a plus, Knox said, though I'm not sure how much more of this our ship can take. She'll hold, Thowrick said, his voice firm. With us at the helm, she'll hold. The Elysium Dawn sailed on, its crew united by a shared experience that would forever mark them, not just as survivors, but as a testament to what humanity could do when pushed to the edge. As they moved through the endless sea of stars, Thowrick allowed himself a moment to consider the journey ahead. They'd faced down an impossible threat and lived to tell the tale. Whatever challenges awaited them next, they'd face them together, with all the chaos and unpredictability that made them human. Because in the end, it wasn't just about reaching the destination. It was about the journey, the battles fought and the bonds formed along the way. And as long as they had each other, they'd continue to defy the odds and laugh in the face of the universe's indifference. Here's to us, Thowrick said, raising an imaginary glass, to the craziest crew in the galaxy. The others joined him, their voices a chorus of agreement as they toasted their survival and the adventure yet to come. To chaos, Vera said, a smile tugging at her lips. To survival, Knox added, his eyes bright with the thrill of victory. To us, Zug finished, his voice full of the kind of camaraderie that comes only from shared madness. And as they continued their journey through the void, the crew of the Elysium Dawn knew that whatever came next, they would face it with the same irreverent spirit and unyielding determination that had seen them through the darkest of times. Because in the end, they weren't just surviving. They were living, defying the odds and doing it with style. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest victory of all.